Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, men, women, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. Welcome to the Christian Whistleblower channel tonight. Something a little bit different, something a little bit fun. We have with us in the house live from wherever and whatever swamp he's dwelling in at this particular moment. We've got the swamp dweller here from the Swamp Dweller channel. Welcome aboard. Nice to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I've always had a lot of interest in cryptids and monsters. Haven't really been able to find a lot of quality information on it. And I was very, very happy when you decided to come on and talk with us. And I guess, cryptids, people are wondering, well, what's a cryptid? Cryptids are kind of like monsters, right? And I guess the biggest, most popular one would have to be Bigfoot.
In a sense, yeah. Cryptids kind of, it's kind of gone from a pseudoscience to more of like a sensationalized boogeyman kind of thing. But in general, cryptids are just animals that you can't prove to exist, but also not prove to exist. Like good examples, like some of the first ones, like just 100 years ago, we discovered there used to be a cryptid called Pongo over in Africa, and they would apparently eat and devour people and terrorize them. 100 years ago, we found what those were. They were called gorillas. So sometimes they can be just everyday things, and other times they're a little bit more sensationalized and crazy. But I feel like at the end of the day, they always stem from some sort of basis of reality.
And you can probably guess what the first question is from the chat room. What about the chupacabra?
That's a classic. I don't know, like, honestly, that much about it. I know it's from, like, I believe it's from Puerto Rico is where it originally came from. Like, this is one that's like, with me, like, I've never really been into like the super, stereotypical popular ones that you would see everywhere, like Bigfoot and all that. I've always been more interested in stuff like bunyips and stuff like that. That like people are like, what's that? But chupacabras are basically blood-sucking creatures that will go, usually like livestock, small livestock, like small calves, goats, chickens. They'll go and they'll leave 2 marks and suck the blood out of them. And there's all kinds of cool, interesting things from like Texas and Mexico, and you can find videos of these alleged chupacabras that kind of look like they're like coyotes with mange, but there's so many different like retellings of the stories from like Puerto Rico and Mexico and Texas, I guess. But ultimately, it's kind of like a vampire thing.
Right. That's exactly what was going through my head. Now, are you personally a person that believes that there is a Bigfoot, a Yeti, abominable snowman, skunk ape, whatever you call them?
Potentially. I'm probably a hard skeptic at best when it comes to anything. I want to believe, and I do believe that there are things out there because cryptozoology, finds new things all the time. So I think if Bigfoot or something like that does exist, it would be somewhere like Canada, Alaska, something like that. Places that are just so untouched and so thick that like that's definitely where I'd hide if I was a 8 to 10 foot tall monster.
Absolutely. Well, I'll risk this. I'll go on a limb and tell you something that happened to me. I'll be 56 this month. I was 17 or 18, and my dad and I were driving from the Tampa Bay area over to a place near Orlando, if you know anything about Florida's geography. And we were driving through 441, which is, a very heavily, densely forest. And we had a pizza in the car. It was summertime. We're driving. My dad had to go to the bathroom, so he pulls over, and he's out over here in the weeds to my right. I'm in the passenger seat holding a pizza, and he left the car lights on. It was an old Chevy Vega, so I'll give you an idea of what it was. And we're sitting there, probably 1 a.m, and at the edge of the lights, from the right, up in front of where my dad is, probably, 20, 30 feet up from in front of where my dad is, I see this creature come into the beam of lights, not totally in them, but not totally out of them, kind of in the edge of it. And it looked, at first I thought, is that a dude? And then it was like, no, that's not a coat. That's more like hair. And it started like smelling the air, and it looked at me, and I'm like, oh crap. He smells the pizza. He's coming after me. And about that time, my dad walks out of the bushes, and I'm a nothing then. I didn't believe in any of this, didn't think about any of this. He walks out of the bushes. He looks at it. It looks at him. It looks at me, and it didn't really shrug its shoulders, but that was kind of the idea I got. Just like, yeah, these guys aren't worth worrying about. And it walked across the road, a little 2-lane highway, and into the big bunch of trees on the other side. And that's all we ever saw of it. What would you, as the swamp dweller, say about that? And you feel free to say you were drunk and seeing things. It wasn't that case, but it could, I understand where you're coming from.
Honestly, like when I say I'm a hard skeptic, I'm not really the guy that's like, oh, you didn't see that. I think that there is truth to people seeing what they see. As personally, I started all of this from what I thought of me seeing something. I can't say if it was a Bigfoot or what, but I thought I saw something one day, and that's what sparked my whole interest into this. So I don't, being a Floridian myself and being very familiar with 441 and a lot of the north central Florida areas, honestly, it could be. I think I am working on a documentary right now about the skunk ape, and I think there's a lot more validity to that than people might think, and it could be explained by a lot of things. But I don't think you're crazy. I don't think you're drunk, but I definitely do think that you did see something that day.
And this is what we would have qualified as a skunk ape, because it did smell like hell. It really did.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been in some areas, living in swamps most of my life, kind of where the name came from, is like swamps have like a kind of sulfuric smell as it is, but
they
like,
do.
but you like when you live there your whole life, you really get used to it. And then sometimes you just get this wretched smell out of nowhere. It just smells like somebody just threw a dumpster right next to you and pissed on it and left it there in the heat. Like it's so bad out of nowhere, but it just goes away in a few minutes. And in my opinion, I'm like, that can't just be a deer walking by. I've never had a deer walk by and I smell it. So I think there is something to that smell. And I think there's something definitely big that carries that,
one of the things that I agree with you on it, and I'm very skeptical about, and I'm thinking if I'm a Bigfoot or if I'm a, whatever you call those creatures, and I've been hiding myself, as long as there's been humans around, I would think that the one way you can make sure that you'll never see a Bigfoot is to go on a Bigfoot hunt. Because if you're crashing through the forest, 6 or 8 people stomping, drinking your coffee, smoking your cigarettes, smelling like people, it would have to be a deaf, blind, and half retarded Bigfoot for you to walk up on it and see it, right?
From what I know, yes. I'm very good friends with a guy named DDoS from the Bigfoot Dogman Research Project. He is a boots on the ground guy. He goes in these woods, and he's probably one of the only people that have ever showed me a video and had me be like, well, that might be a Bigfoot. I feel that his outlook on it is incredibly accurate. These are super smart animals. Like if they've worked very hard to obviously avoid people, right?
Absolutely.
Why would they just like sometimes when you hear, like you watch these shows like Finding Bigfoot and all them hunting Bigfoot, they're like smacking trees and like walking around. Like these shows, anybody who knows anything about TV, these crews don't just go out there, right? Like 10 feet away from them is a medic crew, 10 other crews for them. There's a banquet place where all the food is. Like it's a big thing. You think like if you're running around with a bunch of people smacking trees and you're trying to find something that's apparently elusive and tries to hide from people, this is probably not the way to do it.
That's exactly what I would think. So, I mean, that's probably the best way not to find Bigfoot is to be out there with a great big television production about finding Bigfoot. But people want to be entertained, and I guess it does create some, positive press and some interest. So people, do start asking questions, maybe thinking outside the box. So we don't want to, dismiss everybody out of hand. But it just seems to me like a really bad way to try to find a Bigfoot.
Definitely. Something that I've noted a lot about Bigfoot is that over the years since like the 60s to 2019, it's gone from looking for monsters to looking for answers, is how I say it a lot. When Bigfoot first started, what is all you saw was these massive foot casts and moldings of feet that were like 5 feet long. Like, who could get the biggest footprint? Bigfoot used to be this massive monster with these feet that were just dumb big. I don't know if you ever saw this cartoon called Courage the Cowardly Dog, and they had an episode about it, but his feet were so massive, and that's all you noticed that was big about him. And the whole Bigfoot name, I guess you could say, kind of came from that hysteria. And now Bigfoot's feet are kind of just like a normal 12, 13, 14 size. They're looked at more now as hominids or some sort of ape species, possibly. Like, I feel like it's gone from, oh, we're chasing monsters and headlines, that to now people are actually looking for answers. And the more that you have people looking for answers and not monsters, the more we kind of find that Bigfoot might not be this crazy thing that we thought about, but it could be something very normal and right under our nose that could be even more interesting.
Absolutely. And it's funny because my introduction, because this was right before actually I saw that skunk ape. My introduction to the whole cryptid idea was I don't know if you ever watched The $6 Million Man with Lee Majors, but in one of the last seasons of The $6 Million Man, he was fighting this Bigfoot. There was a Bigfoot that was in the series, and you laugh because it's ridiculous. But as I think back, it ended up that the Bigfoot was like an alien, like an alien AI, and he was coming in and out. And now, if I understand correctly, a lot of the current or at least newish Bigfoot lore is that there's like this green haze or green fog, and many people are thinking that Bigfoot might be something interdimensional.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of interdimensional talk and like alien talk and when it comes to that. And I don't know. I don't really know. I don't have much of an opinion on that at this moment because the way I'm looking at it right now is just like if cryptozoology is about the study of animals and we're
Right.
looking at animals. So when we start going into all this crazy stuff, I generally kind of like just don't focus too much on it. I look at it and I do acknowledge it, and I've had plenty of like debates and conversations on it. I think there is a possibility that there could be some sort of interdimensional being that is going from this earth to somewhere else possibly. That's my opinion on aliens too. If aliens exist, why would they spend thousands of years traveling when they could just go through a wormhole or whatever? It makes more sense.
Exactly. Pop in and out, no doubt about it. And I guess on a show talking about cryptids, we'd be remiss if we didn't remember that the fellow that played Chewbacca passed away here recently. So, rest in peace to him, and best thoughts and feelings to his family. Now, the thing that kind of is interesting to me about cryptids, as a kid, not thinking anything about cryptids, I was really very interested in the concept of the werewolf. Why do you think that story is so ubiquitous and so long lasting throughout human history?
Honestly, I think it just has something to do with how it sparked everything. Like if like there's always that catalyst, right? There's always that one thing, whether it's a trend on YouTube that changes everything forever, or a person taking a picture of, the first rhino or whatever, like, or the last elephant, something like that. I feel like it's just like that monumental thing. Like there was that, whether it's real, fake, it's just till this day, everybody latches onto it because they want that little bit of hope. And I think that's the biggest part about it is like, there is something out there. It's like you hear all these stories all the time, and then you see this one little piece of footage for like 10 seconds of a Bigfoot walking across the lake bed, and you're like, changed everything. Now cryptozoology exists. Bigfoot is mainstream at this point. There's multiple television shows and running seasons on season's end. I think it's just people want there to be something more than us.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Now, you say that you're not, your typical stereotypical like monster hunter and Bigfoot guide. Tell us a little bit about the Swamp Dweller channel. I've got the link in the box below, folks. If you want to visit, make sure you go over there and subscribe. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about the Swamp Dweller channel, and tell us what you think about all this. And if you get a chance, mention the Jersey Devil. We've had 4 or 5 references and questions about that.
Well, the whole Swamp Dweller thing kind of started very abruptly. I had a podcast for many years that went by a similar name of Swamp Dog Chronicles. And that's kind of where the Swamp Dweller name came when I rebranded, when I stopped because I did interviews for a long time. I interviewed Vic Cundiff, Linda Godfrey, pretty much everybody from Monster Quest, Discovery. Like I kind of just went through the whole list and did that. And I started that because I had my own little encounter and just around outside of Ocala, Florida, where I was near where Jeepers Creepers was actually filmed, where I thought I saw something that just I've never seen in my life.
Well, I was around Lady Lake when I saw the swamp or the skunk ape, so we're right in the same neck of the woods.
Definitely not too far. And what I saw that day was big, bipedal, hairy, and just something I've never seen in my life. And I had a lot of like anxiety over it. It was kind of weird. I even had a sleep paralysis over it. That's the only time I've had sleep paralysis in my whole life.
Wow.
So I was just like, this is really affecting me. And like at first, I didn't even know it affected me. That's what was funny about it. And it was just really affecting me at first. And then I started, I talked to a guy named Vic Cundiff, as I mentioned earlier. Went on his show, one of the first episodes of his show. and kind of recounted my experience. And then he kind of just gave me this confidence. He's like, I feel like you are a good representation of cryptozoology, and I think you should do something with that. And he kind of pushed me to start that podcast. And I went like 3 seasons of that, about 30 episodes. And I was just kind of bored of it in a sense. I was like, how many times can I ask people like, the same question worded differently? And I started to lose interest, but I noticed a lot of people were sending me their experiences, and because they didn't want to come on the show and they wanted to share them anonymously. So I just started like narrating them and putting them in like a podcast format. And that's kind of how the Swamp Dweller kind of became a thing. I needed like a persona in a sense. So I was like, might as well kind of keep the old thing going a little bit with a new revamp thing. And Swamp Dweller became a thing. And I just started covering, more and more topics over time. And in the most recent months, I've been doing like mini documentaries and getting into more of like true crimes and unsolved cases. And
no, that's fascinating.
Parks and stuff like that. I've kind of I feel like I'm the alternative to the mainstream of all that. There's David Paulides, then there's Swamp Dweller. There's, there's say all these other dogman things that are sensationalized, and then there's Swamp Dweller. I feel like if you're looking for a place that's not sensationalized, something that's not going to try to make something more than it is, and you're looking for an informative look on things, that's what the Swamp Dweller is. And when it comes to Jersey Devil, the Jersey Devil is such an interesting story, honestly. Again, I'm a little rusty on it, but the story is basically a wife had, I believe it was 13 kids, right? And the 13th one was apparently, she said this is going to be the spawn of the Satan or something around those lines. And when it was born, it was just this awful horse-headed, bat-winged, demonic kind of creature. And apparently it leapt out and it did its thing, and it wreaks havoc all over the Pine Barrens. I've done a few, allegedly true experiences about it, but I've not gone into in-depth documentary, but I should definitely do it soon.
So somebody asked if the Jersey Devil could be a chupacabra. Probably not, huh?
I mean, since the thing about the chupacabra is it's hard to call it a cryptid in my opinion, because like it's more of like it's so much more supernatural and so much more kind of like cult driven or occultish, I should say.
That's a great distinction.
It makes it feel like it's more of like, it sounds like a demon to me. You know what I mean? It sounds like every depiction of some sort of Beelzebub or whatever their names are. Like, I don't know demon names, guys, but
you got the prince of them right there, first shot. Boom.
There we go. Like it just looks like the typical kind of like same thing with Goatman in a sense. I feel like the same thing. It seems so much more like the backstory of that is it was like some sort of government experiment gone wrong and let out, and that just sounds like a freak of nature thing mixed with like some demonic thing, or like kind of like a tulpa kind of thing, in my opinion. Well
said. Would you say Mothman is a cryptid or more of a paranormal supernatural thing?
Mothman, I always thought that as more of saw that more as an omen, because it mainly shows up before tragedies.
That's
before
true.
The bridge fell, and before deaths and before suicides. It's often before 9/11. People allegedly have pictures of Mothman flying by. Like it seems.
I have never seen that. That's amazing.
I actually didn't know that until a couple months ago. I kind of went down the rabbit hole on YouTube, as people do sometimes, and saw these interesting photos and started looking into it. It's just a black speck. It could be anything, but like it was definitely an interesting idea, and it kind of started making me think like this is definitely seems more like an omen. But
yeah, it gave me chills when you said it. That's interesting.
Yeah, because it's really hard, but I feel like that's where I struggle now, and that's why I kind of slowly have gotten away from like the world of cryptozoology, as in the community sense of it, because like cryptozoology has kind of been so muddied. It's hard to tell like what's a cryptid and what's not anymore. Like people constantly say skinwalkers are cryptids, but those are just witch doctors from Navajo lore. So it's like if they're people at the end of the day, and it's like same thing with Wendigos. They're possessed by a cannibalistic spirit, so they're still a person. So how does that make them a cryptid? Like that's kind of where my questions and come in.
Was that what your video about the Wendigo was? I almost started watching that, but I got pulled away.
I haven't done an in-depth video about the Wendigo yet. I'm trying to find a good way to do it without, everybody getting butthurt about it.
Yeah, but that's hard to do. And it's funny. You were talking about who you are and what your thought is, and I'm kind of the same way, but in a different genre. And I've had a few people that have taken to call me a contrarian. So I looked it up. I didn't really know what a contrarian was. And a contrarian is just somebody that goes against popular opinion and goes against popular practice. And that's kind of what it sounds like you're doing in the, craziness slash sort of absurdity of cryptozoology, trying to bring it back to rationality, trying to bring it back to, a science. And I'm trying to do the same thing in my genre. So it's interesting that a couple of contrarians wound up talking to each other about this subject.
Definitely. I think a lot of times it's just like natural for people not to want to accept or associate themselves with people who have a little bit of a different mindset or outlook on things. It's kind of the same thing with politics, same thing in cryptozoology. If you think Bigfoot's this and not this, everybody hates you.
Which is silly, because who else is going to talk about Bigfoot? But you want to cut off half the people that have an interest in Bigfoot. But you said something that fascinated me. And there's this question that's been in my mind. I'm from Florida. You're from Florida, and you talk about true crime. What do you think about this incredible fascination with Ted Bundy?
Yeah, I don't understand this. Excuse me. I'm about to see that a lot, man. It's been driving me nuts. I've seen like the 10, like 3 things about like that, that Netflix series and the movie, and then some other documentary. I'm like, this is nuts. Like,
I mean, this is a guy that beat women to death. Was a what do they call someone that has sex with dead people? Why is he have such great play? It doesn't make any sense. And I think people, from Washington, from Florida, that actually saw him as a criminal, we have a hard time processing it. I don't know how he's so popular still.
It's the same thing with Jeffrey Dahmer too. It's because like people find him cute, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, he's cute. It's doesn't make sense to me. I was like, so you find what he did cute? And they're like, because I was actually talking about some of this the other day, because like they're obsessed with it. And like that's all they talk about is like, oh, they're so relatable. I'm like, how are they relatable though? Like, but listen what he says here. I'm like, yeah, but he said that he's sorry that he got caught, not sorry that he killed these people. And it's like he still did this. Like, I don't know. People romanticize these people, and it makes no sense to me. It's because like if I were to do that now, everybody would be like, you're the worst piece of crap ever. Nobody would romanticize me. But like some guy in the 90s does it, and it's fine. Like, I don't know.
It's a crazy thing, and true crime really is something I think could use someone to go in and look at it from a documentary type of view, and more of a objective, dispassionate view. I think it's very, very interesting. Now, you said you like to talk about and focus on actual real animals, just animals we don't know about, things that have been discovered. Can you walk us through a few of those that actually come to your mind and have been real memorable for you?
The vampire deer is a good one. It sounds like a weird thing, but vampire deers are recent cryptids, or I guess they were classified as cryptids, recent animals that were recently discovered, and they're like a small deer. I believe they're in South American rainforest, and they have like these little fangs, and it's very interesting, and they're interesting little things.
Bambi with fangs.
Yeah, basically Bambi with fangs. There's all kinds of cool ones. The Congo has a lot of interesting sightings. I'm currently looking into some. I can't even even attempt to pronounce these names because I need to. I slaughter them anyway, but I need to attempt to learn them still. But there's all kinds of things that might be dinosaurs there. I just did a very in-depth look that I put out 2 days ago now about the bunyip from Australia, which is my personal favorite cryptid.
The bunyip?
The bunyip.
Bunyip, okay.
So basically bunny with IP at the end, so bunyip.
Okay.
And, it's from Australian Aboriginal lore, and I go so indefinite that we kind of might have found what it could have been. See, some people are like, oh, it's that these Aborigines were seeing seals and we're scared of seals. It's like, dude, this is Australia. Nobody's scared of a seal. Okay. But like it could easily be a marsupial lion that lived until only like 14,000 years ago. And that has the strongest bite to any comparable animal ever living or extinct. It could have easily been that. There's the Diprotodon, which was basically this like a big, massive koala bear that could just wreck anything it wanted to. There's so like if there was it could have been one of those, or it could have just been an aquatic version of those, because it's often talked about being in the water. And it's a very good video. If anybody is interested in a very unknown cryptid, I would definitely check it out. I think it's the most in-depth look on YouTube.
And what is the name of that video so people can find it on your channel?
Australia's most feared cryptid, the Bunyip documentary.
Okay. And we do have an indigenous Australian in the chat room, Teresa, and she says that the bunyips are bad. She's an indigenous Australian, and she says they're the real deal.
They weren't aquatic. Well, I don't know why they were always sighted in the water, but definitely interesting nonetheless.
Have you found anything in Florida that's really surprised you?
Yeah, there's I live not too far apparently from a very dangerous cult. And this actually I only knew this from a story that was sent to me that was allegedly true. Somebody was going through a national forest near me, and apparently there's the people, they're called the Rainbow People. And from when I first found out, they were just a peaceful gathering of, hippies and stuff like that, and kind of like down to earth herbalists and stuff like that. And apparently these guys are not the real Rainbow People, because they kidnapped them and forced them to stay there for like 2 days. And it's very interesting. So I went to go actually look for them myself, and I found an encampment full of a bunch of people. And I don't know. It's very interesting. I didn't
Well,
really
I'm
get to
glad you
talk to
didn't
them
get
much.
kidnapped.
I'm very happy too. They didn't make very much sense, a lot of gibberish, but definitely wouldn't cross my path if they decided to snatch somebody up and try to do some nefarious things to them.
And people have to understand, in Florida, in the summer, out there in the forest, dude, it is hot. It is humid. There is every kind of bug that, and anything that bites you that God ever made. It's not a pleasant place to be at that time of year, for sure.
Definitely. Definitely. I would not, I don't know. They smell bad. You can smell them from like probably a half mile away. That's how you know you're getting close to the
Wow.
encampment. It's just so gross because they just, do their business on the floor there right outside their tents. They don't even attempt to like dig a hole or walk away. It's just very unsanitary, but they're apparently just absolute bonkers and very prone to doing not so legal things.
Now that's fascinating. That really is. And yeah, I mean, I'm from Clearwater, so we've got the Scientologists, and they look much better by comparison.
Oh yeah, we have a Scientologist church not probably like a mile away from my house, honestly.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, and it's you said you were looking into the disappearances of people from national parks and whatnot. What have you been thinking about and discovering that we haven't heard on Coast to Coast?
Um Honestly, I think that there's just so much that goes into a missing person. Whether it's, especially when it comes to these state and national parks and stuff, like I it's such a hard topic because like it's such a sensitive topic, because like there's real people involved, and then you have like two sides of the fence when it comes to a missing person. It's we want answers, and we want people to take it serious and to help us and get our words out, and then you got people who are like, oh, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to also put it in this special package and say some monster took your kid or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it's very tough.
I actually, that's how I found this was I saw somebody saying, hey, have you ever heard of this missing 401 thing? And I hadn't at the time. And I think it was a Coast to Coast video, as you mentioned, that I saw at first. And I was very confused at like how people, like they were so adamant and like so like set on like saying like a Sasquatch took this kid from the forest and said there's all this information, when it was just people who claimed to have seen apparently a Sasquatch carrying a kid. And outside of that, there was like nothing to actually back that up. And to me, that just seems so weird that like so many people were into that and like were down to promote that and like wanted that to be the reason. And I was just like, okay. But I think that goes back to people just wanting to believe something is out there. But so that inspired me to want to look into these things as well, but to actually look at them for what they were and not try to like put this weird spin on it. And a lot of these stories have just weird details about them without having to put Bigfoot into the situation, to be honest. There's this one case, I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but it is from California. I will have to look at that in a second. But he had bipolar issues and depression issues, and he was an experienced outdoorsman. And one day, people think he might have just, got too much for him one day, right? And he had some sort of breakdown. People saw him running through woods through the state park, naked, screaming, "They're coming for me," and stuff like that. And was basically just acting like something or someone was following him. and they eventually found like all his clothes and his belongings in like scattered throughout the state park, like high up in trees and stuff. But they never found his body, and he's still missing to this day.
Ooh, fascinating.
People are like immediately like, that means Bigfoot, but at the same time, that could have been a psychotic break from somebody who has schizophrenia and bipolar and stuff like that in their medical history.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it's definitely still a very, very weird, circumstance to somebody going missing.
Have you had a chance? And I know that we haven't really explored nearly all of our land, obviously, but have you ever thought about or looked at aquatic cryptids? Because of course the ocean is relatively, unexplored.
Oh yeah, we've only explored like 5% of that.
And that's something.
Yeah, that's crazy. We know more about space apparently, and that's terrifying to me.
It really is.
It's like I was bored on the ocean, but I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm terrified of the ocean, but I'm not a fan of it. I feel like who knows what's in there. Somebody mentioned Ninja. Yes, like Antarctic, Japanese legend there. It's not, I don't know. I think that there's probably so many terrifying looking creatures. Like just look at the anglerfish and the giant squid or colossal squid, one of the two that we've just recently discovered, like in 2012. It's just insane to me to think that things can be that big still on this planet.
It's
And then you have
amazing.
blue whales. You see how big blue whales get. So
Yep.
imagine if somewhere down deep, deep, deep in, like, say, the Marianas Trench or something, there is something similar to maybe a megalodon or a massive shark or just some sort of a remnant of the dinosaur ages in there. Just like the Congo, there's so many stories where it sounds like there are dinosaurs roaming the woods and in the oceans there. And like, I would only imagine somewhere deep, deep down in the ocean, they probably still are.
Would you guess what type of dinosaurs those are that from the stories and patching together the accounts? I mean, are we talking Tyrannosaurus or are they, Triceratops? Are they Brontosaurus? What are you thinking?
Well, one is kind of like a Triceratops, Brontosaurus kind of thing, and the other one is kind of like a smaller version, like a mini long neck almost.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so they're not like all like these. They're not these crazy like T-Rex stories, but they do have like some sort of raptor looking ones too. They also have ones that look like kind of like what people think Nessie would be, a
Right.
plesiosaur.
Interesting. Are you in or out on Nessie?
At this point, I feel like Nessie definitely could have existed at one point, but like if it's still there, the lock's not that big. We have the technology now. We've explored pretty much all of it. I mean, unless it really is like constantly leaving out through those underground tunnels, I don't know if Nessie's still alive, but I think Nessie definitely could have existed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I lived in Lake Tahoe for a few years, and they have something there they call Tessie. It's supposed to be the same kind of thing. And I dove Lake Tahoe a few times. I'm a scuba diver, and that's a really cold dive. But I remember one time I was down there, and a big shadow passed over me. I didn't see anything, but that made me think, oh, this Tessie. But I mean, the crawdaddies in Lake Tahoe are a foot long, so it's so deep and so big that I mean, it could have just been a super huge fish. But it's interesting to have those type of speculations. And speaking of being a diver, I've been in the water with a 17-foot great white shark, and trust me, that looks like a monster.
Oh, 17 feet, no doubt. I think people forget how big, like when somebody's like, oh, it's only a 12-foot gator. I'm like, 12, do you know how big 12 feet is? Like 12 feet is two of me. Like, so put me on my head and then imagine that's how big this thing is. Like, I think people like they see it on TV and they're like, oh, that's not that big. Only 17 feet. 17 feet is massive when you think some of the biggest ones on record are 24, 25, something like that.
And they're as big around. They're this was 17 feet, and he was as big around as like somewhere between a VW Bug and a school bus. I mean, they're not slim at all. And we're in the visibility is probably at least 50 feet, crystal clear water. You're looking for sharks, and you turn around and they're there. They sneak up on you, and it's
terrifying.
It is absolutely terrifying. It really is. And just to imagine, those are the ones we know about. What else is in that deep ocean? What else that we don't know? And it's, yeah, like you said, I don't dive anymore because I quickly figured out there's a lot of things in the ocean that can eat you, and they're always there. It's just a matter of being around when one of them decides it wants to eat you.
Oh yeah, as a kid we used to swim a lot down in the Keys, and like anytime you'd have anything remotely shiny, barracudas are coming after you. So like I
Absolutely.
learned real quick not to like them. Then I moved up to like the Central Florida area, and then like I learned about alligator gars, and then I hated the water even more. So
Alligator gars are nasty, and there's just the plain old alligators. I mean, I just was living in Orlando not too long ago, and they pulled a great big old 10-foot plus gator out of this lake because he was eating dogs. And I mean, it's amazing how fast a huge thing like that can move. I saw him get a dog, and it was beyond belief. Something that huge, that big, out of the water, up a bank, onto the shore, getting a dog before it can stagger backwards 3 feet. It's amazing
yeah,
and
it's
frightening as hell.
and they're so fast. People don't expect how fast they can come out of the water. That's why I'm always like, don't go too near, you know.
No, let's go look at it, dude. Don't do it. Don't do it. Tell me a little bit more about what a ninja is. I've never heard of one.
There's not that much about ninjas, and it drives me nuts because it's one of those cryptids that like they're so interesting because nobody talks about them, but there's just nothing to talk about. But it's like you can almost describe it as like a beluga whale with like a bulbous head with no like flipper at the end of its tail, or what you would call it, a tail, I guess,
Hmm.
and no flippers, and it has two really long arms that come out, and it's like and that's it pretty much. And it just apparently it's around the Antarctic area, the Japanese area, and those oceans. And a lot of the times it was cited by whalers. And we all see the memes and the jokes, but Japan likes its whales, and especially in the Antarctic area. Um,
Absolutely.
and there's tons of stories about this thing coming up and just taking down boats, similar to like the Kraken, all those kind of stories. But that's pretty much it that there is to know about. Like, there's just not a lot. And personally, like, I'm definitely digging into it, but like personally, I've just not been able to find much outside of just old tales of people thinking that they're encountering it or spearing it with their. There's this one crazy story about apparently this small Japanese whaling vessel or research vessel, quote unquote,
Yeah.
was going out there, and they were harpooning whales for research, and like they went and harpooned something that they thought was a beluga whale, but it wasn't, and it had these two hands ended up coming out, taking the harpoon out, and apparently tearing off the entire harpoon from the boat. And they apparently made it out alive, luckily. But that's one of the
Wow.
most notable stories I know of the Ninja.
That's crazy. Do you know anything about mermaids?
Um, Honestly, not much more than I guess most people would. I've never I've never really read into them. I've never really found them all that interesting, if I'm honest. But
Okay.
I saw that I saw this very interesting documentary a long time ago from like Animal Planet, if you've ever seen it, where like apparently it's like all these mermaid people swimming and existing, and they kind of go into some documentary about what the life of a mermaid would be and all that. But aside from that, I've never really looked into mermaids, honestly.
Interesting. Well, since the mermaids don't interest you and we're getting close to the end here, what would you say are maybe the top couple of cryptids that do interest you?
The OG one for me that really got me into it was Dogman. So
Dogman.
I
Is that
don't
really is that like Wolfman, or is that more of an all fours Dogman?
um see, Dogman is, I guess Dogman is Dogman all the time. So like it can be bipedal
Okay.
or on all fours. There's like a tons of different, it's like the Bigfoot thing. There's so many different types apparently, and people see so many different looking ones. And Dogman is just something that's always been personal to me because that's pretty much where I got my start from. And I find it very interesting because it's not a werewolf, it's not a Bigfoot, but it's it's just something that, like, if you were to see a 7-8 foot tall bipedal wolf looking creature, that has to be the most terrifying experience when you see something that just all, because like a lot of times there's people hunting or they're just minding their own business, and then all of a sudden they run into what they think is a wolf, but then it stands up and then
Oh,
it towers over them, and it's just like, geez, okay. But what makes me so interested in Dogman is that there are so many, like, you can go back to the Egyptians, like Kenny just said, the
that's
Anubis.
right.
You can find bipedal dog like creatures almost in every ancient civilization all the way until now. So to me, there has to be something
Wow.
more
And
than
that might even suggest that it's more man than dog. If it was if Anubis was a dog man, then maybe smart, rational, able to interact. That opens up a whole new door.
oh yeah, that would be a whole different ball game there.
That would.
Another interesting one I would say is again the bunyip, as I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
Raven mockers. Raven mockers. I don't really know. Again, it's something that's kind of a muddy line between cryptozoology and supernatural Native American lore. But Cherokee used to believe in a creature that would come around death and sick times when there were old people. What makes this creature so creepy is you couldn't see it. The only people that could,
Ooh.
the only way you would ever see it is if you would hear a raven's call and you might see the silhouette of a raven.
Oh, interesting.
Only people that could see it or ward it off were very special type of medicine men, a very advanced, specific type of one. And they would come when famine and disease was very rampant in areas, and they would rip out the hearts and take their heart and take their life and all that. And sometimes they would be seen, and when they would let you see them, they would look like a person. But
Interesting. Because you think about a raven, death, maybe it's, buzzard type of a thing coming around, but then they end up looking like a human. So there goes that logical train of thought.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying because apparently, like, you can see it look like a human, and then right before it's about to, if you are the sick and depraved, its face immediately changes into something just absolutely ungodly and takes your life.
Amazing. Do you have another one that interests you?
Um, Man, there's so many. Thunderbirds. I think Thunderbirds are.
It's funny. I've got a big whiteboard over here, and Thunderbirds is written on there. I've been wanting to look into Thunderbirds.
I think Thunderbirds are some of the most. I think Thunderbirds, if Thunderbirds exist, are the closest thing we're ever going to get to dinosaurs still being
That's
around.
exactly what I was wondering. Thunderbirds. Some people want to go to its depictions of UFO type things. I don't know if it's necessary to go there though.
Man, I feel the problem with like this giant monster thing that I have a problem with is like how do these things sustain themselves and then keep themselves so cloaked,
Yeah.
So one thing, like if there was a giant bird in the sky, that's very hard to not notice. So, but I do definitely, that's probably one of my favorites. It's probably in my top 5 right now is Thunderbird. I really want to learn more, like go to the places that they've been and see if I can't
That's
figure out.
fascinating. And so, sometimes it's just a question of location and site and situation. Like somebody a while back, it went past. I didn't see your name, but they said that they were on a golf course and they saw a tiger.
That's crazy.
So, I mean, seeing a tiger on a golf course, that's a monster, but it's really not a monster. If you're in the jungle somewhere, you would expect to see it, but I don't think you were expecting to see a tiger on the back nine unless it was Tiger Woods, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
what a
think
story he was. He might be a cryptid to make that almost impossible comeback.
definitely biggest comeback of 2019, as they would say.
Maybe, and I think it's one of the great feats in all of sports history. It's amazing.
Definitely.
It's
I think
amazing.
I think big cats are another interesting topic of cryptozoology, though. Like the UK, they found hairs that prove that there is a big cat species in UK that's not been documented. So
Still today living.
I believe so. Yeah.
So, I mean, are they thinking big cat like saber-tooth tiger, big cat?
More of like probably like Black Panther kind of cat.
Gotcha. Okay.
Somewhere around there, because like they see these black cats all the time that are cougar size, and they have found hairs. Like I said, it's interesting because a lot of these new things could just be new hybrids of species that are brought over as pets, very much like Florida, which
Yes.
could have, I think, leads to some of these skunk ape things when you have these chimps running around and these orangutans running around the Everglades.
That's
But
a great point. I never even thought of that. That could happen. That really could.
I think the same thing could happen in the UK if somebody gets a pet that they think they can handle, and then all of a sudden they can't handle it. They let it run out in the woods, and hey, now something's eating your cats.
Because if I think back on it, and I wish I'd have known then what I know now, but I mean, that could have been a skinny orangutan, maybe. I mean, that skunk ape thing that I saw, when you think of it, was kind of somewhere between a chimp and a orangutan, but he kind of looked more humanoid to me. I know I'm thinking dog man, but it wasn't really dog like. It was definitely hominid esque looking, and it was kind of grayish red and shaggy, not super long hair, but kind of shaggy, and it had like sticks and stuff in its fur. So it was very interesting, very interesting.
Definitely. I think skunk apes are a lot more scraggly looking than the average
Yes.
Bigfoot. They're a lot more lanky. They're got that longer, more swampy looking thing because obviously of where they have to adapt to live.
Yeah.
Um,
And they're not real. I mean, I don't see them sitting. I wouldn't see them sitting there grooming themselves. They don't look like they're groomed. They're just rolling on natural.
Definitely. I think also to add it, Dogman is a bad name for a dog man because if everybody who's ever said they've seen a dog man says it doesn't look like a dog. They say it looks more like a cross of a wolf and a coyote when they see the face.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
I think
That's
Dogman makes
fascinating
people think,
stuff.
oh, I'm gonna go make a friend as Dogman. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like then you see this thing, it's like that's not a dog.
You think it's a German Shepherd or something? Not so much. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. So, what's coming up new for the Swamp Dweller? What can people look forward to finding new and interesting on your channel as you keep doing more and more work and turning over more and more stones, so to speak?
Definitely just working more towards doing more of these feature-length documentaries. I'm trying to slowly move the podcast style of stuff where people send in their stories just to the podcast places and try to move them off YouTube a bit. But pretty much I'm just trying to do a lot more documentary and hands-on type content and try to actually make some ground and see if we can't find some of these alleged monsters. And if not, at least document their history and see why and how they came to be.
How difficult is it to do your own documentary? How difficult is the filming and putting all that together?
It's honestly the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Mm.
It takes a lot of time, money, and patience, to be honest, but it's definitely worth it once you find like the bunyip thing. Like we did for 6 months, we redid it 3-4 times, and then we finally met a friend named TW Grimm, who is a very good researcher himself, and he just had heaps of information that completely changed the documentary from going from 4 minutes to 18. So like it changed everything for us, and that's kind of what I think doing it on your own independent like this is you get, because like if you're doing it for like say Vice or something, you have like this set, we have all these set things that we have done. I've done certain small things for like companies like Hulu in the past, and like it's just like you have to do everything exactly the way they want it and you have to do it by these deadlines. But if you do it independently, and we can change it up like we did with that one and make sure it's the best it can be.
That's amazing stuff. Sounds like you got a lot of good things going on over there. Tell everybody again your channel, your website, any other information that you'd like to share with folks who want to learn more about your work.
Well, you can find me at youtube.com / Swamp Dweller Reads, or you can just search Swamp Dweller. I will pop up, I promise. I upload almost every single day, if not every day, things natural and supernatural. If you have a story, a case, or anything you would like to contact me about, it's very simple. You can just go to swampdweller.net. It's all right there on the front page for you. Pretty much, I'm just going to keep putting out content as I do and keep trying to keep you guys entertained.
Do you want any UFO type stuff or more just cryptid monster stuff?
I do everything under the sun when it comes to that. So
Okay.
if you guys got, paranormal stuff, UFO stuff, any kind of stuff you would like to share on the channel, I would love to check it out and see what we can do with it.
Awesome. Swamp Dweller, it's been great to have you. If you get any other breaking stuff, cool stuff that you'd like to come back on and share, just give me a shout. You're welcome anytime.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. The chat room has been full, asked a lot of great questions. They really appreciate your professionalism and your answers. I appreciate your fresh approach. You're not just trying to get a picture. You're not just trying to, find a footcast. You're really, I think, applying a scholarly, an empirical point of view to it. And I think that raises the genre and really helps us all out when we have people that are really competent researchers who aren't just trying to, make a click or sell a video. I salute you for that and really appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower for the Swamp Dweller, and saluting all of you in the chat room. Thanks so much. Remember, we're the last generation of real humans. And folks, let's get busy.